So I know how conferences go. In my world, there's always like Bible conferences and pastor conferences and this and that. And if I can be real honest with you, I find myself that, I don't know if you guys are like me at all, I zone out about halfway through a conference unless I'm the one speaking at it. And then I'm really engaged. So anyways, I kind of recognize that I think there's a lot of people in the room, ooh, don't fall. There's a lot of people in the room who are like me in that regard. And so for this, I mean, when you consider it, we did one session together earlier, me with you guys, and then we had breakout time where you had more sitting and talking, and then you came in here and we got to listen to another awesome presentation, and now you're getting to sit here again and listen to another one. And I recognize that as kids, sometimes we struggle, right? Sometimes it's difficult to pay that much attention for that long a period of time. I get it. And so here's what I'm going to do, because I'm feeling quite just generous today, okay? I'm going to give you a couple things. Number one, I'm going to give you something to pay attention to when you stop listening to me. These guys. I don't know if you can see them all the way in the back. I want you to be, if you are zoning out and you're not paying attention to me, here's what I don't want you to do. Distract your neighbors, right? So be quiet. What I would really love is if you're not going to listen to me, I want you to look at these, and I want you to try if you can tell while I'm talking what the difference is between the two of these. Now, I know what some of you smart kids are thinking. You're saying, Dave, there's a letter P on one and a letter S on the other. Good, good. We're looking for something else, okay? But bravo. I am proud of you. Super duper proud. Hashtag proud of you, okay? So anyways, this is something you can do. The other thing I'm going to do for you, because like I said, I know how conferences go. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to let you guys just sit back and relax for a minute. I'm going to come at you with the Bible here in a little bit. And if you want to open up your Bible to where we're going to be in Luke chapter 7. But every so often with my youth group, like last week we did this with my youth group back in Hutch. We had half of our youth group was doing standardized testing. Everybody was getting ready to start spring break. We got bumped out of we usually meet in the worship center, but we got bumped out because the adults were doing an event in there. And so essentially, because all these things happened, we just did something that I call story time with Uncle Dave, okay? So Uncle Dave's just going to tell you guys a story for a little bit, and you guys can just sit back and enjoy. You don't have to engage anymore. I'm not going to make you think yet. We're going to get there. But this is just story time with Uncle Dave. So everybody, prepare for your very first ever story time with Uncle Dave. This is a story about a time when I was in high school, 142 years ago. Roughly, give or take. I graduated in 2001. How many of you were not born when I graduated high school? You make me angry. I'm very angry at all of you. Okay, hands down. So my junior year of high school, we had the opportunity to be a part of this thing called Close Up. And Close Up was this deal where kids from all around the country got to go to Washington, D.C. Now, every 4 years, this trip was especially cool because you got to go during the presidential inauguration, right? So, like, we just got to see, Trump got inaugurated, and this whole big party in downtown Washington, D.C., right? Well, the year that I went, it was 2001. It was the year that George W. Bush got elected the first term, right? And so, like, I don't know, you guys are all too young for this, but there was all this controversy about the election. It was this heated thing, and I was kind of into politics at the time. And so the opportunity came where I got to go be a part of this thing. I'm like, yes! And there's about 25 kids from my school, and there's about, I don't know, maybe 5,000 of us total from across the country. And it was just this really cool opportunity to get to kind of see Washington, D.C. at its finest, right? We got to go to see shows being recorded where Democrats and Republicans were yelling at each other, and we got to go to the actual inauguration itself. I got to go to a ball, one of the presidential balls, like after the inauguration, there's these big parties, and like the president and his family will make an appearance at all these little parties, and I was at one of those things. I got to see the president the night he got inaugurated. It was really cool. But before we ever got there, we get to the airport, and we're waiting to get on our plane. Oh, I need to say this real quick. Every single word that I'm about to tell you is exactly true and exactly the way it happened. Because there's going to be multiple times we're going to be like, nope, didn't happen. Every single word that I'm about to tell you happened exactly the way that I'm about to tell you, okay? So, we're getting ready to get on the plane. My buddy Kyle, who was the fullback for our high school football team, fullback/middle linebacker, and is one of those dudes who like has to turn sideways to go through a door. You know what I'm talking about? He's just like swole for real. That's what my generation used to say for like really strong. But anyways, he was just absolutely ripped. And so anyways, as we were getting ready to get on the plane, there was about 10 names that got called, and they asked people to come up to talk to the lady at the front desk. And Kyle's name was called. And so like, oh man, like I hope he's able to get on the plane. Like, oh, did they overbook or, whatever. Like we're all kind of panicking. And he comes back. He was one of my best friends. Comes back with this smug smile. Like, hey, what's going on? I just got bumped up to first class. Really? And so, like, I ended up having to sit next to, like, some guy I didn't know. And here's the thing. Dudes, tell me if I'm lying, I'm dying. Every time you get on a plane and you're sitting next to somebody you don't know, true or not true, you always end up sitting next to the other biggest guy on the plane. I watch the people come down the aisle, and I'm like, oh, like, a really small, petite girl with big headphones on. Please, because I don't want to talk. I'm not looking to make friends, right? But no. So I end up sitting next to this big guy and like all crowded in and, whatever, the whole trip, right? I only tell you that Kyle got bumped up to first class to tell you this. When we got off of the plane, I'm not sure to this day what exactly happened. But by the time we landed and we got off, Kyle was looking a little green in the gills, as they say. Right? Looking a little bit sick, a little bit wobbly. His knees were not so good. It was we came to find out, either food poisoning or some sort of an allergic reaction to the first class food. That's what you get. But by the time we got off the plane, he was like, whoa. And again, we're not talking about a little dude. This is a big old dude, right? And so we had to wait. When we got there, our flight had been delayed because there was a storm. We got delayed probably about an hour. But when we got there, the flight from Chicago that we were meeting the kids there to get onto one charter bus to drive into the city, their flight got delayed like 2.5, 3 hours. And so stuff is already happening for the close-up. They're already doing registration, all this kind of stuff. But we are waiting and waiting and waiting at the airport. And the whole time that we're waiting, Kyle is just like, I'm like, bro, are you okay? No. Good. How was first class, sucker? Anyways, I'm like a mean person. Anywho. And so anyways, finally, like hours later, the group from Chicago gets there, and I promise every detail that I'm about to tell you happened exactly as I'm going to tell you. I don't know if I mentioned that already. The group from Chicago gets there, and we all get onto our bus. Now, it's one of these like really fancy, like crazy cool buses with like the 2 seats in the back. There's a bathroom, and you can put all your luggage underneath on the side, right, and all this kind of stuff. So we load all of our luggage up. We all get onto the bus. I sit down next to Kyle. Our group was the first ones to board the bus because we were standing outside waiting for the Chicago group to catch up. So we all get seats. Well, by the time the Chicago group gets in there, not everybody has a seat. And so some people are having to stand up. And if I was a good person or a wonderful chivalrous man, I would have gotten up to giving my seat to girls. But there were some girls who didn't have seats, and I sat there like a jerk. Now, this is important because my buddy Kyle, who you might recall had just gotten some food poisoning, is sitting next to me going, right? So there's about 4 or 5 girls who don't get a seat, and there's one who was really unpleased, really not happy about the fact that, like, I can't believe we got delayed and blah, blah, blah. Now I don't even get a seat, blah, 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 right? Yelling, right? So she sits down, and in the back of the bus, there's a bathroom door in the very back corner, and she sits down against the bathroom door. And I just saw your face caught it. You know where we're going. Hang tight. We'll catch up with the punchline in just a second. About 10 minutes into this bus, Kyle looks at me, he's like, oh, I'm going to be sick. And I'm like, do me a solid and get away from me, all right? I don't want to do that here. And so I said to him, I was like, oh, dude, there's a bathroom in the back of the bus. And he's like, oh, yeah. And so he gets up, and I mean, like, again, he's huge. Like, grr, he's lumbering down the aisle on this bus, right? Right to the bathroom. Now, again, sitting in front of the bathroom is a very upset girl that she did not get a seat on the bus. And so Kyle said, will you please move? And she proceeds to say the following, I'm going to edit it for content. I'm not going to get up at all. Nobody gave me a seat. You don't get to go to the bathroom. Which if Kyle had to make tinkle is probably okay, right? But Kyle says, you need to get up now. And she's like, I'm not getting up. Now, it's important at this point that I remind you, every single word of this story happened exactly the way that I'm going to tell you about it right now. Kyle looks at this girl sitting on the ground on the bus, and he just, And I mean to tell you, he didn't like deflect to the side. He didn't aim for the aisle. He was looking at the bathroom door. She was in front of the bathroom door. And I mean, she got baptized in vomit, like covered. It was so much vomit, I can't even like begin to describe, like, because again, he's so huge. And like, I think everything came out of him. At one point, she got hit with a rib or a collarbone. It was like, raw. At which point, if I'm lying, I'm dying, he grabs her by the vomit-soaked shoulders and like pulls her out of the way, and he goes into the bathroom, and I didn't see him again until Wednesday. Anyways, so now this girl who was already very upset about not having a seat on the bus is absolutely covered in vomit from some guy she's never met before, and this puts her into a fantastic mood. So she starts yelling and screaming like, hey, we need something to clean this up. I can't believe I got thrown up on blah, 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 blah. And everybody's looking back at her. And so the sponsors at the front of the bus are like trying, like, what do you do? What do you do, right? And so they pass back. They have a little bag for, it's like a sawdust that you can pour on the stuff to like whatever. She's like, what am I going to do? Pour this on my head? Thanks for nothing, right? Anyway, but they pass back this aerosol can of Lysol, right? Every single word of this story is as true as I am telling it to you right now. It's important that you understand that. They pass this can of Lysol back, I guess to spray and clear because, the bus just smelled like the inside of a football player, right? So anyways, they pass the Lysol back to this girl, and I swear to you, she says this, what am I supposed to do with this? And she takes it and she chucks it up to the front of the bus. Now, everybody on the bus was looking at this girl making a scene, except for, I call him motion sick kid. Don't know who he was. He was from the Chicago group. But is anybody here motion sick kid? You have to sit in the front of the bus and look out the window, otherwise you get sick. Well, that kid was sitting staring straight out of the front of the bus, and hand to God, she throws this thing, and it goes up and clocks him square in the back of the skull to the point where, like, he got stumbled out of his seat. Kid you not, you could see a half crescent shape of blood on the back of his head. He got rocked clean right in the dome. Now, turns out, if you smash somebody in the back of the head with a Lysol can, that's assault with a weapon. And so they now mind you, this is January. It's like 9 degrees outside, right? The bus driver at this point is like, I seem to have lost control here. And so he pulls over off to the side of the road to deal with the kid with the head wound. While he's there, he calls the police. We have to wait for the police to get there at this point. Police come, literally handcuff this girl on the bus, covered in vomit in the freezing cold, handcuffed. There's not a worse day than that. I'm sorry. But so anyway, she's handcuffed, right? And they end up apparently charging her with assault and then sent her back to Chicago. She was in D.C. for like 42 minutes, and that was her entire trip. So we're waiting and waiting and waiting. The whole time we're getting later and later and later and later, right? And so at this point, we finally get to the hotel after the kid gets his head wound treated and all this stuff. And Kyle is still dying in the bathroom, like every 3 to 5 minutes throughout this whole ordeal. So we get to the hotel. And so I have to carry all of Kyle's bags in addition to all of my bags because Kyle can't move, right? And so we're at this point, 4 hours late, right? So everybody's already done registration, all this kind of, it'd be like coming in right now to start the, Live Your Faith conference, right? Hey guys, what's going on? So anyways, I'm walking in, we go to the hotel, we don't have time after we do our check-in to go to our rooms. We have to go straight to our conference rooms that we're assigned to for our separate orientations. And so I've got 2 suitcases and 3 bags just strapped onto me, and I'm walking, carrying all of this stuff. And of course, the orientation had already been going, and so I push open the door, and have you guys ever been in a room where the door is uber squeaky, right? You know what I'm talking about? I push the door open again. Everybody's already sitting down. It's nice and quiet about like this. Wait for it. Yeah, about like that. And so anyways, I push the door and it's that. It's a really big door. And everybody's, they all look at the back. Hey guys, how's it going? Sorry, I smell like vomit. So I walk in, I put all the bags down, whatever, and like legitimately in the entire room, it was packed. I mean, every single seat was taken, like except for one, and you'll never guess where it was. It was like clear up in the second row, dead center of the row. I'm like, you got to be kidding me with this. And so I walk up, and like you're doing like, excuse me, pardon me, hold on, excuse me, whatever, right? And so here's the thing. Had the plane initially not gotten delayed with the storm, and had the Chicago plane not gotten delayed with a bigger part of the storm, and had my friend not got bumped up to first class, and had he not got food poisoning, and had he not yacked all over some girl from Chicago, and had all of this stuff not happen in exactly the way that it happened, then when I sat down in this room, there's a really good chance that I would not have sat down next to her. I sit down, and I look over my left shoulder, and beside me is the most beautiful girl I have ever seen in my entire life. And in my head, I thought two words: worth it. Worth it. Everything that I've been through today, worth it. My friend might die from food poisoning, worth it. Holy cow, she's beautiful. So, the guy finishes talking. I'm not listening to a word he's saying. I'm like doing this. Like, guys, we think we're slick. We're not slick. They know when we're looking at them. But one of these numbers. And so finally, the guy stops talking, and like I decided, like, man, I got to talk to her quick before she gets up, and all of the other guys realize who this girl is, right? And so I look over at her, and I just kind of smile, and she smiles back. I'm like, oh, right? And she says, hi. Wait, no. Hi. My name's Jenna. I'm like, Jenna's the most beautiful name I've ever heard in my life. So I'm going to respond, and I'm going to say this. I've worked it out in my head almost immediately. I'm going to say, hi, my name's Dave, right? Because I'm smooth. Now, there's one other component of the story I have not told you yet. Again, this is January, and I had just gotten over a pretty nasty head cold. But you know how sometimes when you've, like, had a cold, you have, like, a lingering cough, and if you, like, breathe in, like, it triggers your cough reflex? No, I know. Some of you are already there. Wait for me. I'll get to the punchline in just a second. So she says to me, hi, my name's Jenna, in this sweet voice. And I go to say, hi, I'm Dave. But when I went, it triggered my cough. It's important that you understand that every word happened exactly as I'm about to tell it to you. I coughed, and out of my mouth came a loogie. Hold on, it gets way worse. I cough, and out of my mouth comes a loogie, and hand to God hits her square in the forehead. And it stuck there. Hard to come back from that. Hard, but not impossible. Gentlemen, I believe in this life every so often you have a handful of opportunities where you are presented with the opportunity to be the coolest guy on the planet. I believe that every so often you will be put in a position where you can actually be 100% impressive to a girl. Most of the time we don't take the opportunities. Most of the time when we try to take the opportunities, we make a big fool out of ourselves, but not today. Not today. Not with Jenna. Jenna gets this loogie hit right on her forehead, and I swear she goes like this. She has that look of confusion, like just hit my head. Wipes her. Like, the only thing worse than having it on your head is like then seeing it on your hand. She wipes it off, and she, again, just like confusion meets disgust meets absolute bewilderment, right? So she reaches down, she wipes it on the floor. Because where else are you going to wipe it at that point? And she looks back at me, and she's just like, ladies and gentlemen, I took the chance. I stepped up to the plate, and I said, without a doubt, the coolest thing I've ever said in my entire life. Because if you can come back from that, you can come back from anything. So she's looking at me with this confused look, and here's my response. Say, well, at least we'll have a funny story for our grandkids one day. Come on, that's awesome. Right? You get it. Oh. And I mean to tell you, sometimes you got to step up to the plate and swing for the fences. You're going to hit it 400 feet or you're going to strike out and fall down in the dirt, but you got to take your shots. And so I say that to her, and if I'm lying, I'm dying. She gets this kind of coy little smile, and I'm like, I'm back. And we spent the entire week from that point forward together in Washington, D.C., completely inseparable. I mean, we went to the inauguration together. We held hands through mittens. I remember when the fireworks were going off over the Lincoln Memorial. While no joke, some of you won't even understand this, Ricky Martin was performing. You guys remember Ricky Martin? He was a thing. So anyways, he was performing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and they kept showing George W. Bush on the side screen, kind of doing a little, like an old white guy dance, you know what I mean? And they were shooting off fireworks, and what I remember that more than anything is holding hands with Jenna, because we had a fantastic week together. So at the end of the week, Jenna. At the end of the week, I decided I need to do something really sweet. Like this has been just a life-changing week with Jenna. And so like we said, we'd been out to dinner and we'd done things, like hang out with groups of our friends and stuff, but I was like, I gotta find something. And so I went and I found at a store there in D.C., I found they had these monkeys, stuffed animals, monkeys, that had long arms with Velcro on the hands, right? And so I bought one of those for her, and here's what I was gonna say, like, this way, like, when you take it home, you can put it around your neck, and it'll be like, I'm hugging you, right, kind of thing. And by the way, we didn't have a thing called iPods or iPhones or anything like that. No. I had with me a Discman. Now, let me explain what a Discman is. It's a thing that's about this big, right? And you put CDs in it, and then some of them had a thing you could clip to your belt. Kagoosh! And so I brought a bunch of CDs with me, and I looked, and I finally found a place that sold little portable speakers. And so I got these portable speakers, and I dug through my CDs to look for the best, most romantic song I could find. And I set up a little thing where I got some flowers, and in the stairwell of our hotel, I put these flowers with a little card for her that I wrote, this really nice little, like, I've loved this week being with you and all this. I put the little stuffed animal there with it, like ready to explain that. And then I put my CD player and my speakers there. And then I had one of her friends go get her and said, like, send her down to here to this stairwell. So she came in, and she kind of did, like, oh, these girls, they know what they're doing. Like, she walked in, and she did this, like, this number. Like, that's how you know you've done something good, gentlemen. So she throws her hands up, covers her face. She's just like, and so I reached down, and I pushed play on the CD player. And I will not sing a lot for you because I do not fancy myself a great singer. But I got the Garth Brooks Double Live album out. And I asked, can I have this dance? And we danced in the stairwell. Oh, you're thinking it was the dance. No. You know a dream is like a river, ever changing as it flows. And the dreamer's just a vessel that must follow where it goes, trying to learn from what's behind you. And never knowing what's in store makes each day a constant battle just to stay between the shores. And we danced. And I remember at the end of that, she put her head right on my forehead. I remember that distinctly. Just like, walked her back to her hotel, put her back to her room, and then I went back to my room. And the next day, we were leaving. And so we went to the airport, and we were leaving about an hour apart from each other, but we rode the bus at the same time. And so I went with her, and she was flying out ahead of me. And so I sat there with her at her gate, right, like the whole time, like holding hands. I mean, like I said, we have shared this week that was just amazing together. Right? And then she goes, like they're calling last call for people to board the plane. She gets on her plane. And like she, like legit, like back in the day, this would have been more of a thing. But as she's getting on the plane, like she keeps looking back down the runway and we're waving back and forth. And then I never talked to her again. Right there, stand up. You stand up, stand up, stand up. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. Come, no, oh yeah, okay, that's fine, come here. When I said that, this is what she just did. Oh. I'm going to read this. You tell me if this is wrong. This has been in my shirt pocket the whole time. At the end of this story, at least one girl is going to look like I ripped the beating heart out of her chest. Would you say that was you?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I predicted the future, everybody. Now, here's the thing. There was a bunch of them doing it, but they all did it. Yeah, like, here's the thing. We didn't have Facebook back then, right? Like, Twitter didn't exist. And so if you wanted to keep in touch with somebody after an event like that, you had to do this. You had to get a piece of paper out of your desk and write a whole thing down with your actual hand. And then you had to put it in a thing called an envelope and then seal it real tight. You had to go buy a stamp, put a stamp on it, put that joker in the mail. Who in the world has time to do all of that? Right? It's interesting because when I tell the story, here's what happens. When I say like, man, we had this amazing week, and then we never talked again, girls across the room will be like, and guys are like, yeah, I get it. Who wants to write letters, right? But here's the thing. And why, Dave? Why did you waste our time telling us this story? Let me tell you why I did. I think in reality, a lot of our walks with God are a lot like my relationship with Jenna. I think what happens is we have these amazing experiences with God. We go to summer camp, or we go to a retreat, or we go to the Live Your Faith conference, or we go to any number of these things, or we have a really good Wednesday night, and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so in love with God, and it's so amazing. And then we leave there, and we never take the time to do anything about it ever whatsoever at all. We don't open our Bibles, we don't spend time in prayer, we don't do the things we know that would cultivate a relationship. We just wait and we excitedly live for these mountaintop experiences, and then eventually we can't figure out why we don't actually have a relationship with the God of the universe. I think that my story with Jenna is probably a lot like a lot of your stories with God. Now here's the thing. We're doing one of those mountaintop-y things today. We're having a fun conference and we're learning about new stuff. The biggest fear I have every time I get onto a stage and I speak to a bunch of youth, the biggest fear that I have is this: that kids will act or feel as though they have made a change in their life and they leave having not made any change at all. There are kids in this room right now who are not listening to me. I would prefer that be the case. I would prefer you tune me out and not listen at all than think that something is happening when you're not really ready to commit to it. I asked a lady here recently, I was getting ready to do a wedding. She had been married for like 57 years. And I said to her, I was like, hey, can you tell me, like, I do wedding ceremonies all the time, like, and I do marriage counseling and all this. Tell me the secret. You have been married for 57 years. What is the secret? How have you guys not separated in 57 years? And she says this to me. She says, Dave, the secret to staying together is that we never left each other. Thanks, right? But the more I thought about it, it's brilliant. When things got hard, when days were difficult, when times were tough, when the relationship was not working out the way they wanted it to, they were committed to being in an actual relationship. Didn't matter if it was a good day or a bad day. Didn't matter if it was the birth of a child or the loss of a child. Didn't matter if your husband took care of you and was romantic, or if he acted like he didn't even know who you were. I was committed to being married to him no matter what. And he was committed to being married to me. And this is the kind of relationship that we ought to be trying to cultivate with God. The kind that says, I am committed to this on the good days, on the bad days, it doesn't matter. So, here we go. We're opening up to Luke, chapter 7. And we're going to jump through this because here what we're going to look at today is this. I believe that there are two possible, we'll put that back. There we go. I believe that there are two possible responses to coming face to face with the God of the universe. One of them will lead to a relationship like the one I had with Jenna, and one of them will lead to something deep and meaningful like that old married couple had together, okay? There are two possible ways that you can respond to coming face to face with the God of the universe. If you're writing things down, or if you're thinking about writing things down, or if you might potentially want to remember something, feel free to text this to yourself. The two possible responses are pride and brokenness. You can be proud, you can have pride, or you can be broken. So here we go. We're going to start in Luke 7, verse 36. It says, one of the Pharisees, let's real quick pause in case people don't know the Bible very well. The Pharisees were the religious elite, and they did not care for Jesus. The Pharisees were the ones who actually were successful in getting Jesus killed, bringing charges against him that were bunk, right? And so one of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him, asked Jesus to come over and eat with him. Which points to one thing. Within the Pharisees, there were people who absolutely hated Jesus, and there were people who probably kind of supported Jesus, but there was a group in the middle, and the group in the middle was on the fence. They were trying to figure out if Jesus was who he said he was. So the fact that this guy was willing to ask Jesus to come into his house points to one thing. He's at least on the fence about who Jesus is. So he asked him to come, and so Jesus went into the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. Now, I have a pinched nerve in my neck, so I can't tell you how much this is going to hurt me, that I'm going to do it anyways because I want you to understand. When it says they reclined at the table, hold and fat. Okay. They actually would eat like this with the table right here. They would recline at the table with their feet sticking out behind them. Ooh, cramp. Ha! Ha ha! No joke, real cramp. So they would recline like this in order to eat, which I would think would be wildly uncomfortable. But you want to know the best thing that I found in all of my study about reclining at the table was some of the other versions will say it this way. They reclined to meat, but not M-E-E-T, like, hey, how you doing? M-E-A-T, like filet mignon wrapped in bacon, right? And so it said that they reclined to meat as if like the word meat was a verb. And I think that if ever I was to write my autobiography, right, it would be reclining to meat, the Dave Atherton story, right? Like, filet wrapped in bacon. So anyways, that's just an aside. Reclining at the table. So we have the Pharisee. Now, on this saying, I told you that there was a P and an S. P is for Pharisee, okay? This is going to be the Pharisee throughout the course of this lesson. And behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner came. S for sinner. Now, what do we know about the woman who was a sinner? What we know is this. She was essentially a prostitute. She would have been looked on as very, very, very unclean. She was a woman of ill repute. She would have been looked down on. She would have been the lowest of the low of society. So we have the stage set. We have a religious leader. We have somebody on the very, very bottom end of society and all of the expectations therein. And they are the two main characters here. Now listen. It says, when she learned that Jesus was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster flask of ointment. Now, basically call it a bottle of perfume. Some of the older translations, I think King James, if anyone rocks King James, maybe it's not King James, but somewhere along those lines, it was the perfume was called spikenard, right? Which is just a hilarious name. Like, have you guys ever seen the Calvin Klein Obsession commercials? Like, passion, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Obsession by Calvin Klein. Just like thinking like, passion, desire, spikenard by Calvin Klein. Anyways. So she brought an alabaster flask of ointment. And it says, standing behind him, because remember his feet were out behind him, she began weeping. She began to wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair from her head. She kissed his feet and anointed them with the ointment. What we see here is this. This woman walks into this situation and she knows who Jesus is. She at least knows who Jesus claims to be. And she did two things. Number one is she looked in. She looked at herself. And then she looked up at Jesus. When she looked in, she saw how broken she was, how sinful she was, how lost and how hurting she was. And she looked up at Jesus, the picture of holiness, and her only possible response when she looked in and then looked up was to just break down. She was sin standing in the presence of perfection, and she just fell at his feet. She was broken by the choices she had made. She was broken by the relationship she had kept. She was broken. She cried so much that she wet his feet with her tears, dried it with her hair. She kissed his feet and spent the ointment. She rubbed that on his feet. It's estimated that that would have been about a 1-month salary investment in that ointment. She was broken when she looked inside and then looked up. Now, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, this is important. He said to who? He said to who? He said to who? He said to himself. Now, what does that mean? He thought it. Yeah, that's good. We're going to circle back. He said to himself, if this man, being Jesus, were a real prophet, he would have known who this is and what sort of woman she is that's touching him, for she is a sinner. See, when the Pharisee saw Jesus, here's what he did. He looked inward, saw who he was. He looked up at who Jesus claimed to be, but then he looked around the room. He got real judgmental because he was able to look around and justify. See, I fill these with white and red. The white is maybe the good things within somebody, and the red is the sin that they struggle with. That he looked and said, well, she's got more of the red than I do. She's a sinner. If Jesus only knew who she was, or if he was who he said he was, if he was a prophet, he would know that this woman was a sinner. And again, who did he say that to? Okay, everybody. Who did he say that to? And Jesus, answering him, said, I'm going to try that one again. And Jesus, answering him, said, do you understand why that's interesting? He thought it. The guy thought it. He was having a thought in his head, and Jesus is like, hey, buddy, about that thing. And he's like, wait, what? Like Jesus turns to answer a man who was thinking a thing in his head. That's crazy. And they just, we just read it, and he answered the man. No. He answered a thought from a man. Anyways, said, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he said, say it, teacher. Or another translation says, teach on, teacher. And Jesus gives him this story. He says, listen, a certain really, really rich guy had 2 people who owed him money. One owed $500 and the other owed $50. When they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Now, what he's doing here is he is setting the stage. He is saying, essentially, hey, guess what, Simon the Pharisee? I have 2 people here. One of them owes me $50. The other one owes me $500. If I offer forgiveness to both, who's going to appreciate it more? And he said, the one, I suppose, for whom he canceled the bigger debt, the one who owed more. And Jesus says, you have judged rightly. And then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, so keep this in mind. He turns to the woman, but he's talking to Simon. This is a woman who would not have had the eye contact of many men in a situation like this. Most people would have ignored her at best or pushed her out of the house at worst. He looks her square in the eye and says, hey, you, the one who struggled with all of this sin, the one who struggled to make these decisions, the one who's been hurt and abused, the one who's had all of these problems. He's looking at her, but he's talking to Simon. He said, do you see this woman? Do you see this woman? Look at her. I got to imagine in that moment, she is terrified. She is so used to not being seen. I entered your house, and you gave me no water to wash my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears, and she wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, which was customary at the door, But from the time I came in, she's not stopped kissing my feet. You didn't anoint my head with oil, but she anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many." And again, who's he looking at? Her. Her sins, there's a ton of them. Her sins, which are many, are forgiven. For she loved much, but he who is forgiven little loves little. And he says to her again, this time talking to her, "Your sins are forgiven." Those who were at the table began to say among themselves, "Who is this that he even forgives sins?" And he said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." We see in this passage there are two responses to the God of the universe right in the room with them. This woman who had massive amounts of sin in her life, who had made terrible choices, who had made infinite mistakes. She had been battered and abused. She had been rejected and neglected. When she looked inside and she saw all the stuff, and then she looked at the holiness of Jesus, she broke down. She didn't say a single word. She didn't have to. She was broken by who she was in the presence of who God was. That's what brokenness looks like. Simon the Pharisee, he looked inside and he saw all of his issues, but then he looked around the room and saw this disgusting woman and said, "Well, I'm not that bad." That's called pride. Pride is most often rooted in insecurity. You know that? It's because you know the things that you have inside you. It's because you know the sins that you struggle with. And so in order to justify yourself not feeling bad all the time, what do? You look at others and see who's worse. The difference is that one person left forgiven and was changed and had a relationship with the God of the universe. And one person left the same miserable person he was when he came in. I asked you guys, what's the difference between these two? In fairness, it would have helped to have had a time machine. Because I want to look through, you guys gave us, you guys had some real honest moments earlier where you wrote down some things that you struggle with in your life, some sins. And I want to show you the difference between broken and not broken. Because this is big. Because in order to really understand this, you need to understand it from the angle of God. Like when we think of broken, we think about it in our terms. I want you to see why God finds broken beautiful. There were two people at the table. They were both sinners, and they were both lost. One of them reduced herself to this. She didn't care who was looking. She didn't care who saw. She didn't care who was in the room. She knew she had to be broken before the holiness of God. And the other one clung to foolish pride. But see, we look at this and we think, oh gosh, what a mess. This is what Simon thought, the Pharisee. Oh, gross. Get yourself together. Do you know why God looks at this and sees beauty in this? Check this out. I'm not good enough. I'm a liar. I look at things I shouldn't look at. I don't think I'm beautiful, even though I know I was created in God's image. I'm addicted to pornography. I'm overwhelmed by a desire to be fulfilled in a relationship. I struggle with thoughts of suicide. I can't get over my dad's death. I've been cutting. I keep guys around that only want to be around me to give me the wrong kind of attention. I'm struggling with drugs and alcohol. Depression. Sometimes I'm blinded by hate. This person just wrote everything. And this one got me, because this is not even a thing where we know who wrote what. Somebody wrote, I can't tell. The reason broken is beautiful to God is because that's when God can reach in and take things from you. If you want to have a life of faith that you can actually live out, you know what you do? Every day you wake up and you choose broken. Every day you wake up and you choose not to care what the world thinks about you, but only what Jesus Christ thinks about you. I was sitting the other day, I was actually talking to a pastor of mine who pointed me to this thing to read that was about monks. And I never knew this about monks, the guys who wear the robes and they live in monasteries. You know why they wear the robes? Here's what happens. When they come in, when somebody decides they wanted to be a monk, they would go into the monastery and basically they would give the monastery all of their possessions. And the monastery would sell and whatever, so they had money to run the monastery. They gave up everything they owned except for one thing. You know what the one thing they got to keep was? The clothes that they were wearing the day they walked into the monastery. They got to keep whatever clothes were on their backs. And then they would give them this robe. It's called a habit. It's an itchy, ugly robe that you are to wear every day that you're in the monastery. And then what the monks would do, and this is mind-boggling to me, is they would take the clothes that they brought in to the monastery with them, and they would take their habit, and every night when they went to bed, they would hang both up. They would both be hanging in the closet. And then every morning when they woke up, they'd open up the closet door, and they had to make a decision. What clothes am I putting on today? Am I going to stay true to the commitment I made when I came here to be a monk, or do I want to put back on my old clothes and go back out into the old broken world? This is a daily decision. Every day you wake up, you have the opportunity. You can choose broken or you can choose pride. But if you want to know why your relationship with God seems to only happen once a year when you go to summer camp or when you come to this conference or when you do a fun event, if you want to know why, what do you look like all the other days of the year? If you want to live your faith, it has to be authentic to you. If you want to live your faith, it has to be real. And when that happens, the God of the universe, this is crazy, he forgave her sins, which were many. He could reach in and take them out because she was willing to be broken before him. And when you know forgiveness like that, you've got no problem committing every single day of a 57-year relationship. When you understand forgiveness like this, we don't have to have the reminder every year that, oh, you really need to live your faith. In just a second, the band is going to come up. You guys can actually start heading up if you want. And they're going to play a song or two, I'm not sure. And here's what I want to invite to you guys to do. Right across the front here. I know for a fact, I read every single one of the cards that you guys wrote out things you're struggling with on. What are you going to do today? Are you going to look inward and know that these are the things you struggle with, and then look around and see if you're better than everyone else? Or are you going to look inward and focus on nothing else but the fact that Christ calls you and says, I am ready to forgive every single thing you've done, every self-doubt you have, every imperfection, every mistake, every bad relationship you've chased after? You have an opportunity to start today to be broken before the God of the universe. So we used to do this when I was in church growing up, and some of you guys may do it more often. We don't do it in my church now so much, and it kind of bums me out, to be honest. We're going to call this thing an altar. An altar is where you come to bring a sacrifice. I want to challenge you guys to bring the thing that you know you're struggling with the most, the thing that hurts you the most, the thing that devastates your walk with God the most. And I want you to bring it here and just be broken. If you're ready, I want you to give it to him. It might hurt, by the way. It might be difficult. It might be emotional. But it will be better than living a life in a fake world with fake people trying to act like you're better than everyone else. I barely know you guys, but I love you. I want more for you than what culture tells you is okay. I'm going to pray, and then the band's going to fire it up. And like I said, if you're ready to lay that down at Jesus' feet and to sacrifice yourself and to sacrifice your sin, today can be the day that you start living your faith for real. Let's pray. Father God, I don't deserve forgiveness. And it is absolutely mind-boggling that you give it anyways. God, I pray if there's someone in this room who has never experienced that, what it means to be broken before you, what it means to accept the forgiveness that you offer. God, I pray that you would absolutely devastate hearts right now. God, I pray that as kids come up here, that it wouldn't just be a show, that God, they wouldn't even know what anyone else in the room is doing because they're so focused on you and who you are. Because God, they know that they are broken inside and that the only way to fix that is with your grace and your love. God, change hearts, change lives, make disciples. Because only you can. We love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.